am recording. And welcome everybody to episode 21 of Reinvention Conversations from the Front Porch. I'm your host, Hollis Thomases, and this evening's guest is Susan Knight. She's a financial advisor with Merrill Lynch out of Houston, Texas, no less. Yeehaw! So Susan is going to be telling you her reinvention story, but before we get going with that, let's hear what Susan's drinking, and then I'll tell you what I'm drinking, and then Susan and I will do a toast.
Well, how about I show you? I think I can just reach behind here a second. And it's, can you read that?
Yes. It's Thirsty. Thirsty Buddha.
Thirsty Buddha. Yeah.
I think that can is as big as you, Susan.
It's coconut water.
And how do you like drinking coconut water?
It's an acquired taste. I took to it right away, but not everybody likes it. But for me, my eyebrows, it helped my eyebrows to grow back.
And we'll explain that. There's more to that story in a bit. I am drinking, because it's starting to get cold, although we had a lovely day up here in the greater Philadelphia area. This is a deep Syrah from Cayuse Vineyard in Walla Walla, Washington. And I like to describe what I'm drinking to everybody. So this one is a really deep tobacco, smoky, licorice, dark fruit nose. And its taste is equally dark, a little smoky, and a really long finish. It's got 14.2 alcohol and a nice high price point to match. So this one's a kind of a hard one to get. My husband brought it up from the cellar for the weekend, and we didn't open it. So I opened it today. Hey. That's what we do. So a toast to you, Suze.
And to you.
To life and reincarnation, much success.
Yeah.
So everybody, Reinvention Conversations from the Front Porch is brought to you by Reinvention Works, which is the destination for all things reinvention. We want you to be empowered to get to your next future. And we do that through tools, programming, education, and networking. And tonight's webcast is meant to inspire, inform, and instruct you through real life stories of people like Susan. So Susan, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes for you to tell everybody from whatever point in your life you think you began reinventing to where you are today. And then you and I will start our little conversation. Go.
Well, I had a few minutes to think about this before we came on. And I thought for me, I think it's important to sort of frame my history. So I'm going to try and do that in 5 minutes. But so actually, I was born in England. I was born in a small town called Exeter, which was a small city, really. And when I was 5 years old, my parents decided to immigrate and to leave England. They were not from, as we used to say, the right side of the railway line. And so in England, to get ahead, they chose to leave. So we went to Argentina, actually, which when I look back on it, it was amazing, but packed up the family and went off to Argentina. And we lived there for 5 years and probably would have stayed, but the Argentinians didn't want any more expats there. So we were asked to leave. And we went back to England, and from there we moved to South Africa. So an interesting start to life. I finished my education there. I went to university for a brief period. And in my second year of university, I decided that I wanted to work. I worked for a few years, and then I'm really dating myself here. But
the rest of us are too.
Yeah, because I'm going back to the 70s. Oh. And in 1976, where the riots started in South Africa. And I was on the right side of the fight, but the wrong side of the government. And I chose to leave. It was a little later than the 70s. It took me a while to get it together to leave, but I left and I traveled for a number of years. And that would take more than 5 minutes to run you through all of that. But at the end of the day, I arrived at the States, and it was 10 years. It was about 1988 that I arrived. So there were some things that went in between that time, but and that's really where I had to the reinventions. The first reinvention started.
Okay. And then what did you do when you got here?
Well, I needed to work. And so I said to myself, I asked myself, well, what do you know, what can you do? And so, well, I know how to travel. And so I proceeded, tell me if I'm going too long, but in those days, again, it was typewriters, electronic typewriters, but typewriters and mail, post office. And so I went down to the library and I started reading up on travel, and I ran across this word that was incentive travel. And I said, ooh, what's that? And I read a little more, and they said, well, it's companies that put on trips and actually pay for their employees to travel. And I said, why didn't I know about this earlier? And so, long story short, I mailed every travel company I could think of and managed to get a job in New York City, of all places. And so that's where that career started.
And how many years were you in incentive travel?
Well, 15 or 20 years. Yeah, 20 years.
And why did you leave?
That's a long answer to that as well. It was awesome. It was a great experience. I mean, I turned incentive travel into performance improvement, which meant what is it that's motivating the employees to do the work, to go on these trips. And it went beyond travel and became all kinds of incentives. Could be time off. So I really morphed from the travel to why are these programs in place? How do we structure these programs to motivate people? And that was great. But I always felt the truth is I felt like I was faking it. And what I mean by that is I left college in my second year of college. So I got by in the States because I have an English accent. I mean, I got away with a lot, is the truth. Because people thought, I was very smart because of the way I smoke, the way I speak.
And, the way you smoke.
The way I smoke. And those days, I think I did smoke.
So you sounded and looked sophisticated.
That's right. And everyone wanted to know if I was related to the Queen, Actually, it was Princess Di in those days.
Right, right.
You're not young. You're not old enough to remember Princess Di, are you?
Oh, stop it! Oh, stop it! That's hysterical. Oh God. So I'm gonna just continue with the line of questions because I think it kind of coaxes the answers out of you anyway.
Yeah.
So you felt like you were faking it.
Yes.
The fact that you believed in the fact that you were faking it, i.e., were you your own impediment?
Probably, but I didn't have the official qualifications. So when I say I was faking it, I would read up on it, and I did it just by gut and by instinct. But I hadn't had the privilege of a university education, and I believe today that it is essential for every woman to go to college, and it's a real privilege. And so I needed to backtrack and to go and get that, to fill that hole in me.
That's super interesting, and I really can't say, if this is just an intrinsic personal thing, or a woman thing? Because I think at the moment I'm thinking of Steve Jobs, who didn't
Mhm.
finish college, and Mark Zuckerberg, who didn't finish college, and all these fellas who didn't
Mhm.
mind going by instinct, gut, and frankly, you were very innovative. Was there external circumstances that made you feel like your incomplete education what made you less complete?
I think partially it was cultural. I did go to an all-girls school, and I feel like I had a fantastic education, in England, Argentina, and then in South Africa. And I just, I just knew that I could do it. But when I went to college at 19 years old, first of all, it felt like a financial burden on my family. And again, that was more my need to not rely on my family. It really wasn't necessarily about them. And so I didn't want to, but I wanted the education, but I didn't want to depend on anybody, and those didn't go very well together. So I left school, but and really emotionally, I was not coping that well in college when I was 19 years old. And I think that happens to a lot of young girls.
Right, right. And so sort of fast forward to when you left the incentive marketing business,
Yep.
was it to go back and get your education at that point?
Well, I did that while I was still working.
Okay.
So it was interesting because I went to go to a Catholic college because my background was I'd been to a Catholic school, so I thought I should go to a Catholic university. But in those days, again, there was not as much flexibility to get a degree. And they were very good. They directed me to, here's a little plug, for Laterno University, which is out of Longview, Texas, an engineering college. And they were innovative in their programs in that they would, first of all, they worked with me to get credit because I had gone to school here and there and everywhere along the way and just needed to sort of bring all of that together. And they accepted my credits so that it was an accelerated process for me. Because really what I wanted was to get my MBA, is what I said. Mm-hmm. But, I had to get my undergraduate first to get my MBA. But they said, okay, here you are. This is how many credits you have. This is how many you need. Here's your program, and if you follow this program, you will graduate in X number of weeks. I think it was actually 18 months. And so I was able to do that while I was still working. I say I got my education on an airplane.
Okay. and so did you intend with that education now and sort of whatever completeness and confidence that came with that education, did you then intend to leave your career and change careers?
Perhaps would have been the way I answered it. What I thought that I could get off the road, simplistically, because I traveled so much and I was seen as a salesperson, and I really wanted to do something other than be, quote unquote, a salesperson, which consultant salesperson. And I was just perceived in a certain way in that industry. And I thought that maybe the education would help me to transcend that. As it turns out, it didn't.
When did you have that realization?
Well, finally, after I got my undergraduate, I continued on and I got an MBA, and then nothing changed. And so I was like, well, this is great, because I got my MBA in finance. So now here I am in a marketing business with a finance degree, but what was I going to do with that?
Right. So you are currently in the business of finance, and was that an intentional transition for that reason, to satisfy, like your MBA in finance?
Yeah, well, there were a lot of things that crystallized in my reinvention. So I had started to become incredibly stressed out at the thought of getting on an airplane. So emotionally, something was going on inside me that said, you got to stop doing what you're doing. And also, this was 2008. So folks probably remember what was happening in 2008. The stock market was down, 40%, et cetera, et cetera. And on top of that, at the end of 2008, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So that really gave me that additional impetus to reevaluate my life.
Yeah. So,
I don't think I answered your question.
no, you did, because it was, really how did you come about your decision to change? I mean, all the things that you were doing were with the desire to change, but it was
Correct.
almost like, when I finish this, my world is going to change, and when I finish that, the perception of me is going to change. So you were
That's right.
waiting for change to happen for you, and it
Correct.
wasn't until you decided to make change happen for you that it
Correct.
happened for you.
That's a great way to say it. I think that maybe life pushed me in that direction. I believe that I had to listen to what was out there for me. Now, I was thinking again before we came on tonight about when I first came to the US and living in New York City, and that was back in the 80s, and that was a big market. I don't know if you remember, the stock market was going crazy, everybody was making tons of money, champagne was flowing in the streets, and I thought, hey, I'd like to be a stockbroker, I'd like to make great money, but then I was like, well, I'll never be able to do that. I'm a woman, number one. I don't have any connections. I'm an immigrant. I do have an English accent, but so. And then this is really what. So I thought about it. It played within the back of my mind. Didn't know how I was going to transition, and in reality, an email came in. I had gone out and I'd gone to websites and I'd done research about financial advisors and sent out resumes. So I'd sort of put it out there, but I was making too much money at the time for me to almost voluntarily leave what I was doing. And I was very caught up in staying at a Four Seasons and having expense accounts, and so there was a lot of emotional attachment and self-valuing what I was doing. And so truthfully what happened is an email came into my email box. I'm looking at the stock market, and it's going down, 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 red, and an email came in and it said, here are here are 10 things. If you can say yes to these 10 questions, you'd make a good financial advisor. And I went, got it, got it, got it, got it, got it, got it. And responded to the recruiter. And, exactly like that. Got it, got it, got it, got it, boom. And the recruiter contacted me. And, it just happened. Then the next thing, I had an interview with Hong Ogle, who was very significant in my life. And she interviewed me on the phone and said, come on in. And I was, in the middle of chemo when that happened. And, I'd lost my hair. I was having hot flashes. I couldn't, my mind was like mush. And so I don't really know how it happened, because I went in, I met her. I just remember like sitting in the chair interviewing, like perspiring like crazy from the chemo. And I don't know if she didn't notice or I'm just a really good actress, but she invited me back. I passed the math test. I've got no idea how I passed the math test. And she hired me. I mean, that's really my reinvention. Now, of course, when I say hire, it's not like they were going to pay me, $100,000 a year. I mean, basically, I was taking at least a 50 to 60% pay cut to go and, do what I want to become a financial advisor.
No, don't stop yourself to do what I wanted to do.
Thank you.
That's what you were going to say, and you corrected yourself.
Yeah, to do what I wanted to do, which was to change, to get out of where I was and to do something, different to what I was doing.
So throughout all of these, different kinds of reinvention, what's been the most rewarding part of it, of the process?
The most rewarding, I think the most rewarding process is just, that's a good question. Just a sense, a sense of not feeling like I was faking it anymore. So that hole went away. Like going back to school, I knew the knowledge, I knew the information,
right?
And I really could help people and improve their lives. Is really financially help them in their lives today, which is what my job is about. It's helping people to meet their goals. Honestly, I'm not sure I really knew what this job was or how well suited I was to it, because, a financial advisor is really a coach, a life coach, but we talk about money.
Mm-hmm. Well, and money and life, especially in this country, are very intertwined.
Right, mm-hmm. Right. Anywhere, right.
So now I'm going to ask you a harder question, which is, out of all of these, this up and down that you've been through, what has been the most challenging part?
The most challenging part. Just sometimes just getting up. Just, you can really have, I'm going to cheat here a little. Sorry, I went off screen, but
that's okay.
I'm going to read a little quote.
Okay. So
it's from the book The Secret. Not to publish someone's book, but it's from the book The Secret, and it says, I think everyone goes through times when they say things aren't working right or things are going bad. Once, when there were some things going on in my family, I found a rock and I just sat holding it. I took this rock, I stuck it in my pocket, and I said, every time I touch this rock, I'm going to think of something that I'm grateful for. So every morning when I get up in the morning, I take it off the dresser, I put it in my pocket, and I go through things that I'm grateful for. And what that does is it gets you out of, I'm feeling sorry for myself, or I'm never going to make it. Like, I've got 5 fingers, I've got 5 toes. Hey, I'm alive, I'm ahead of the game. So in particular, I think what transformed my life, and you'll hear this a lot from cancer survivors, is, I had to make a choice about whether I wanted to live or die. And I wasn't sure, because a lot of times prior to getting cancer, I wasn't happy all the time. But once I really faced the consequence of dying, that changed me. And then I made a decision, I'm going to live. And the rest really was simple.
Right.
And I learned from that, have a goal, make a decision, and then just walk towards it.
Right.
And, thank God for me, I'm 5 years cancer free. Yeah. Not everybody is as blessed, but yeah, touch wood.
Right. We're knocking wood. And Tom Dearline, who is another one of the program's webcast guests, actually, I was on vacation, so my fill-in host interviewed him, and he was a war survivor. He was shot and was given last rites on the way to the hospital in Iraq. And he said after that, after he survived, and his wife of the time left him in the hospital because he was going to be a paraplegic. And, he said after that, everything is cake.
Right.
He used to have road rage.
Right.
Yeah. So does that, Does it also liberate you? Like, do you feel that you said you used the word
Absolutely.
transformed? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why you'll hear that a lot from people, you know. It really does change you get the gift of life and you get the gift of enjoying your life.
Right, right. And how about during all of these times? I mean, you you intentionally left your folks because you didn't want to be dependent on them, and yet,
Yeah.
so how did you get support during all these times? You moved to a foreign country, and where did you find support?
Emotionally or financially or
Well, I think more emotionally and then morally.
um, well, I actually found, that's interesting. America has a lot of places to get help. A lot of, things cost a lot if you have money, like medical help. But I actually reached out to Catholic Charities again because, that was my association, Catholic. And they still have it today. So I went to a counselor. And in fact, I still have a blanket that they gave me, a patchwork blanket that I kept, that I put out for guests. And gosh, I did a lot of talking here in the States, just talking about, the noise that I had inside. So that was the beginning. And then through my life, I have just had different support groups in one way or another, be it women friends. Most recently, about 10 years ago, actually, the time that, I found out I had cancer and made the career change. Well, a couple of years before I made the change, I met a partner, a significant other, and I sometimes question whether I would have been able to do the journey without him. And it's not that he, um, uh, financially supported me. What it was never, never been judged, always been totally supported, and oh yeah, sure, go do that. That sounds like a great idea. So very empowering in that way. I didn't come from that background. I came from a background of, oh, I wouldn't do that, So that really is what enabled me to take the next steps, I think, as well.
Right, right. So for a change, kind of, not only were you not alone, but you had someone in your life who was like, "Hey, I believe in you. Just do it."
Yeah.
No qualms.
Right.
Fantastic.
Exactly.
Well, because we're at the top of the hour, I want to open up the floor for Q&A and let the folks in the audience ask you questions. So, as a reminder, folks, you should see a little Q&A box at the bottom or sides of your Zoom window. So just type in your question there. And I know that people don't type as fast as some other folks, so take your time, and we'll wait and see if some questions come up. And in the meantime, I will ask Susan, maybe a quick
Not a difficult one, please.
one. I won't ask you what the definition of success is.
Okay.
I will ask you, do, do you think, how would you know that you've completed your reinvention, or that you've achieved that next reinvention, at the end of it? Like, how do you know you're there?
I don't know if you ever are, really. I think life is reinvention. Um, Again, my mother now is 85. Because of my job, I talk to people all the time that have aging parents. And, that's a whole another reinvention and challenge and process of, letting go and getting ready to go on to the next journey, and wherever that is. So for me, without being grandiose, life is just, the whole thing is reinvention. Practically speaking, I think there is some emotional part of my journey left, which involves probably, and I haven't really ever said this, I don't think publicly, involves probably going back to South Africa. It's a place that I left because I felt that I couldn't change. I couldn't change the country, and now the country's changed, and but it's still in trouble. And I don't know if you've been following the news at all. They've had riots in the colleges there recently, and so what I'll do there, I don't know. I mean, I have had a vision of sitting in a cottage on the coast in a village. So I don't know where that will lead me. That could be my final reinvention. But it's difficult now because I have family here. So, and I have close relationships. So, and it may be that the relationship that I'm in right now, has to change somehow. So I don't know what the next course is. I don't have children, so that makes it a little easier for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, so do you feel though that with each of these new reinventions and phases of your reinvention, do you feel less fearful?
Well, I feel more financially secure. Is how I would answer that. Which, really is, I think, is part of my message too, that if you want to change, if you want to reinvent, you have to prepare.
Well, of course you would say that. You're the financial advisor.
Right. Well, my mom and dad started that process for me very young. And you're probably going to need more than you thought you need. And it's probably going to take longer than you thought it would. Right, Hollis?
Right.
So, but there's never the perfect time. So it is a balance. And I don't have all the answers. So each person, needs to just think that through for themselves.
Right. And what if you had to give folks who are considering reinventing themselves, say 3 things that they can put into action tomorrow, what would they be?
3 things that they could do tomorrow. Well, to take some time off and to start to think about all the different scenarios that could happen if they make this change. And then you'll come up with the most likely consequence of what you do. And if you've thought about all these different simulations, you're going to have a pretty good idea of whether or not it's going to work. And then also go back to just the real simple process, which is get a blank piece of paper and put pros and cons, pros on one side and cons on the other. And then in about 30 seconds, you'll know whether or not you want to do it. Because you'll come up with all the pros and none of the cons. And then have a business plan if you're going to start your own business. Talk to a lot of other people that have walked the walk before you. I mean, all of the things that we read about that entrepreneurs should do. That's that advice. It's worth it. Have a mentor, et cetera, et cetera.
Great. All right. So everybody out there, do you have any questions for Susan? I'm doing a lot of the talking here. And if not, we don't want to keep anybody later than we need to. But
well, what about you, Hollis? Let me ask you.
Okay. Turning the tables.
So what do you think you need to do to prepare for reinvention?
Well, I think that you have to do a lot of self-reflection and get to know yourself I think that it's one thing to say that you want to reinvent, and it's another thing to actually do it. And in order to do it, you have to fortify yourself for the journey, because the journey is not smooth and not pretty and not perfect. And so that fortification could be anything from
A
reading
glass of wine, I hope.
a, a bottle. What are you kidding? Drink a lot of wine, stock up on cheap wine, go for sales. Um, and recognize your own blockages. I think that I know for me, even before I started my reinvention, I had there was a woman who's written a book. It's called Managing Thought, and she was a speaker more than once at an organization I belong to, and her process was basically, there's a lot of noise in your head, and a lot of the noise is self-defeating.
Yep.
And so, you have to stop listening to the noise in your head, and you have to reduce the chatter and recognize that it might be defeating you. So if you can't get through whatever those blockages are, you're not going to proceed to the next phase of the process, because you're your own worst enemy. That's what I learned for myself. And looky, now we have a question. Okay, so we'll throw this out there. One last question, besides mine. Do you think you would have succeeded in your reinvention without the positive support of your partner? Could you have done it if he was a more negative voice?
It certainly helps to have a positive partner, or a good friend, or somebody who's walked the path before you. I just think it made it easier. I don't think it was impossible to do it on my own. It just made it a lot easier for me, would be the way. I'm very grateful for having that partner in my life. And I think it has helped me to heal in many ways, emotionally and spiritually. I will say that your family of origin, and I love my family of origin, but maybe it's good to create an alternate family. And there's many different kinds of families out there, the church, counseling, girlfriends and wine, so that would be my advice. Don't let it stop you. If you have someone unsupportive, just like, well, I don't want to hear that.
Right. Again, it's certainly helpful, and can be more difficult when somebody doesn't support you. But if you have enough conviction in your desire and your drive, so that brings up another whole thing. But I'm with you. I think that and frankly, that's what I'm trying. This is the Reinvention family.
Hey, here we are, your new family.
So all you on the program today, you're going to be my peeps.
Family.
So I think what we're going to do is we're going to let everybody wrap this up and get us concluded. So I'm going to share my screen one more time so we can take you over here to Susan's contact information. For those of you who are on the program this evening, if you want to get a hold of Susan, here's her email, susan.knight@ml.com. And of course, we welcome you to future webcasts. They're all fun and exciting like this, and informative, and we never know where the conversation is going to go. So you can learn about our future webcasts by going to reinventionworks.com/webcast, or you can follow us on Twitter. We are Reinvention Work, singular there, because we can't be plural on Twitter. There's just too many characters in our name. We are looking for sponsors of this program and other programs. We are a great transformative audience, and mostly folks in the prime of their lives with this income. A perfect target audience for a sponsor. And next week, we're doing something that we do once a month, which is the last Wednesday of the month. We have our monthly tweet chat. So you use the hashtag Reinvention Works on Twitter to find the conversation and I'll be posting up the topic and the questions for our consideration. We do that at the same time, which is 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, and then we go back to our regular webcast program with a new guest on the first Wednesday of next November, which is November 4th. So please join us again. Register, tell your friends. We appreciate you. Susan, do you have anything you want to say? Any plug or last minute comments?
Just please, if I can help in any way, feel free to reach out.
That is awesome. So everybody, thank you so much. And there we go. We're going to get going here.
Bye.
I guess I didn't work my screen well, but I'm going to go forward anyway. Bye, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye.
Take care.